everybody, welcome back to another Craft Break Live. My name's Emma Pniewski. I'm a content creator here at Plaid, and today I'm going to be talking all about this really wonderful 7-piece Mod Podge kit. It comes with 3 different formulas of Mod Podge. It's all in our 8-ounce size. You get matte Mod Podge, gloss Mod Podge, and satin Mod Podge. So whatever type of finish you're looking for your Mod Podge project, then rest assured you will have it with this kit. And it also comes with a really great 4-piece foam brush pack, which is great for all different types of Mod Podging techniques. And we were inspired to create this really sweet spring-themed picture frame. We kind of used a faux watercolor technique, and the reason we called it faux watercolor is because with all of the tissue paper overlapped, it looks really natural and kind of reminded us of like a watercolor technique that you would get with real watercolor paints. It's really simple to do, and I'm going to walk you guys through exactly how to do it today. So what you're going to need, if you want to follow along with me, is a wooden picture frame, and we went ahead and actually painted our wood picture frame white. We just found that the colors of the tissue paper that we use really pop off of the white frame. So we went ahead and we already painted it white. Next, you're going to, of course, want to have a bottle of Mod Podge. So for this craft in particular, it's really up to you, whatever type of finish you want to have on your finished frame. I used gloss Mod Podge, but it's really up to you. Whatever finish that you want, you can use. And then, of course, some tissue paper. And that's really all you need. You don't even need any scissors for this craft. So let's go ahead and get started. So like I said, I already went ahead and I painted my wood frame white with just some regular acrylic craft paint. I used apple barrel paint for this frame today. And now I'm going to dip into my gloss Mod Podge. Set that aside. And then here comes the fun part. You get to pick out really whatever kind of tissue paper you want to use. So we used solid color tissue paper, but pattern tissue paper could be really pretty for this craft too. Whatever colors you want to use, whatever matches your home decor, or whatever really you're just feeling that day. Okay, so we have all of our tissue paper. And this is one of those great crafts where you can repurpose some of those odds and ends you have lying around in your house. It'd be a great thing to just take a peek in your gift wrap drawer or your gift wrap closet and see what you have, and then be able to utilize it and give it a whole new life. So let's get started. So to get this really natural kind of textured look, we actually ripped the tissue paper as opposed to cutting it with scissors. And I'll show you what I mean by that if you're a little confused. So just like it sounds, just ripping it like that. If you want to have really loose edges, then you can go ahead and rip all the 4 corners. And you can kind of manipulate it too by holding it at different points of the paper and watching it rip like that. Okay, and then you end up with these really natural, organic looking shapes. So whenever I'm doing this craft at home, I always like to go ahead and just rip a few pieces. It's nice to kind of see them laid out a little bit to kind of get the hang of what I'm doing before I actually go ahead and start applying my Mod Podge. And one thing too that I always like to keep in mind when I'm doing something like this is I like to think about how my different colored tissue paper is going to look overlapped on top of each other. Something that I would personally try to avoid is overlapping a warm color with a cool color, because in that case sometimes your colors can look a little bit muddied. So it's always nice to think about how those 2 colors are going to blend together. For instance, if I'm using a really hot pink and this kind of peachy corally color, those 2 colors are going to work really, really well because they're both warm colors and they're just going to give you a kind of lighter pink color. Now, if I wanted to overlap this mint green with this pink color, you see how we get a little bit muddied in here? Which, if you like that look, then by all means, you can go ahead and do that, but I just wanted you guys to be mindful of that before you went ahead and started overlapping your colors. but I don't want you guys to be stressed out about that at home. You can always rip a few pieces, overlap them before you seal them down with your Mod Podge, and see how it all looks together.
So Emma, what inspired you to create this project?
That's a great question, Emily. We were just thinking of cute Mod Podge techniques that we can share with you guys at home. We thought that this would just be so sweet with the watercolor effect, and of course, spring is right around the corner. It's really fun to look at. It's super springy. The colors are so springy, and I don't know about you guys at home, but I feel like watercolor always reminds me of spring. I think of florals and just the organic, natural style of watercolor paintings. Reminds me of spring.
And you have a little bit more control when you're using the paper, I feel.
Absolutely, you do. If you are not a painter and you're more of a crafter, then this is a fun craft because you can do something really super simple and get the look that you want. Okay, I'm going to rip a few more pieces here. This is a really fun craft for the kids to get involved with too. I feel like kids would have a lot of fun ripping up the tissue paper.
My son would have so much fun ripping. He'd be like, you want me to do what?
Yeah.
Okay, I will most definitely rip that paper
Yeah.
for you.
Let it rip. Okay. So now that we have a good amount of papers ripped, and if you like the edges, see this one's a little too straight for me. I'm not loving that corner, so I'm just going to tear that corner off a little bit. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and start laying down our Mod Podge. So I'm going to dip my foam brush into my Mod Podge, and I just want to apply a pretty thin coat. With tissue paper especially, a little bit of Mod Podge goes a long way. So another thing I should mention too is whenever I'm working on a large-ish piece that I want to Mod Podge down, I always like to work in sections. That way I can ensure that my Mod Podge isn't going to dry, it's going to stay nice and tacky while I'm working. So our Mod Podge is laid down, and I'm going to go ahead and lie the first piece. Because tissue paper is so thin, a lot of times when I'm working with it in Mod Podge, I like to tap it down in one area, so one corner. See, nothing else is touched down. And as I'm laying my tissue paper down, I like to come at it from the side that I initially touched down on and run my finger across, kind of pushing out that air. And that way you don't get as many air bubbles. This is a similar technique to use if you want to Mod Podge napkins or any type of really fine material. So I'm going to get my brush again. And wherever I'm thinking that I want to lay down my next piece of tissue paper, we already laid down that initial layer of Mod Podge, but I just want to make sure that when we overlap on the piece of tissue paper that we already laid down, just make sure that there's a little bit of Mod Podge on there so that it has something to stick to. So same deal, lay it down. Ooh. See what I just did there? That's okay. Mod Podge is very forgiving, especially with tissue paper. So if you make a little crinkly mistake like I just did, it has a pretty forgiving working time.
So we have a comment from Rainbow Fairy Crafter. They said, one, hey, and two, my grandma's dog Coco would definitely help rip some paper up for you.
That is awesome. I love that, and I also love that username.
Yeah, it's very unique, and I feel like I want to see what you're making too.
Yes, absolutely. I would actually love to hear what kind of Mod Podge projects you guys are working on at home. If you celebrate Easter, if you're working on any Easter crafts, if you're working on any spring crafts in general, let us know in the comment section. So just keeping up with what we talked about, if we're overlapping our tissue paper, make sure that there's Mod Podge on that tissue paper. And I found too that it's always nice to have a couple of more subtle colors. So we have our mint and our peach, and then to have a couple more bold colors to kind of break up those more calm colors and just add a little bit of spunk and interest to your
I
project.
was thinking pizzazz,
Yeah.
but spunk's a great word too.
And if you feel like you need more Mod Podge in certain areas, then feel free to reapply.
And I think this goes back to what you were saying about working in sections, because if you're working in this corner and expect that top left corner to still be tacky when you get up there, it's probably not.
Exactly, that's a great point, Em. And you can overlap these pieces of tissue paper as much as you want. So you can overlap in bigger areas or in smaller areas. Just be mindful that whatever you do overlap, those two colors are going to mix together. So just make sure that you kind of test it out. You see if you like those two colors together, and then feel free to keep going. Okay, we're going to stick one last one, and then I'm going to give you guys another little tip. Okay, so ideally I would go around my whole frame and I would continue to fill up my tissue paper until it looked something like this. You can use bigger pieces of tissue paper, like here. You can use a little bit smaller like we did on our frame that we crafted together today. And then once your Mod Podge is dry, you can go ahead and actually grab a piece of sandpaper, and I prefer a rougher grit. So this is a 120 grit sandpaper. For today's little demo, of course this isn't dry, so we're going to be a little bit risky, but ideally you would want your finished Mod Podge project to be dry before you do this next tip. So sometimes it's a little bit tricky to get a pair of scissors and to work so closely around right up to the edge of whatever you're trying to trim. See, it's really hard to get a clean line a lot of times. So what we like to do here in the studio is we actually like to take a piece of sandpaper, and without getting any sandpaper onto the top of your surface, you want to go at it from an angle and kind of just swiping down on the sides. We're going to swipe down. We're not swiping back and forth like you would traditionally use sandpaper. I'm going to hold it so I don't make a big noise. I'm just swiping down in little quick swipes like that. Not going up, just down, kind of at an angle. And we end up with a super, super clean line. And that works for tissue paper, napkins, scrapbook paper, really most things that you would try to Mod Podge, except maybe like fabric. It wouldn't work with fabric, but that's a great little tip to get a super, super clean, straight line every time on your Mod Podge project. And with that, that was what I had for you guys today. So I hope that you enjoyed following along with me. If you decide to make this craft at home and want to post it on social media, make sure to hashtag Plaid Crafts. We always love to see what you guys are working